Hello, dear friends, and welcome to Oh My K-Drama, the best summary channel on YouTube. Today's episode is sensational, so I invite you to subscribe to the channel because that's the only way you'll receive my summaries daily. So don't waste time. Subscribe now. In today's episode, we have a couple who seem deeply in love during the day, but every night, the husband brutally assaulted his wife. Worse still, every morning, she was forced to wear clothes chosen by In Wuk. Even her lingerie had to be to his liking. He didn't want any man approaching Marie, so he kept her locked inside his luxurious villa all day. He even installed surveillance cameras throughout the house. Marie tried to escape many times, but she was always caught. She couldn't run from her wealthy and powerful husband and would always end up being beaten when she was brought back home. She didn't know how much longer she could endure that life. That day, she called her best friend for help, saying she was going to the hospital to visit her sick mother. Under the guards' watchful eyes, she entered the hospital, but once inside, she secretly slipped out the back door and managed to meet her best friend. But In Wuk discovered that she wasn't at the hospital and immediately went to find her. At that moment, Marie's best friend went to the bathroom, leaving Marie alone with her friend's boyfriend. In Wuk saw her laughing and talking with another man. Consumed by jealousy and rage, he stormed in and dragged her away. On the way home, In Wuk's fury reached its peak. He sarcastically asked if she had fun with another man. Marie tried to explain that he was her friend's boyfriend and that she had never met him before, but In Wuk refused to listen. Accusing her of lying, he said that if he hadn't found her, they would have done something else. Upon returning home, In Wuk closed the curtains, took off his watch, rolled up his sleeves, and approached Marie. Seeing the animalistic look on her husband's face, she felt more desperate and terrified than ever. She knew she was about to be beaten again. Marie weakly cradled her head and cried over her tragic fate. The next morning, the maid brought birth control pills, which Marie threw away as usual. She knew that In Wuk would use a child to keep her trapped forever. However, this time, he caught her in the act. Like a demon, he dragged her into the bedroom and squeezed her face with force. After another brutal beating, her body was covered in bruises. Marie could no longer endure this tortured life. The mere thought of In Wuk kissing her neck made her feel sick, and she ran to the bathroom to vomit. That was when she made a drastic decision. She grabbed a pair of scissors and cut her long hair. She could no longer live with him. She thought about ending her own life to escape In Wuk's grasp, but she had a sick mother who needed her care. That day, Marie saw a news report about a renowned plastic surgeon in Korea who could completely change a person's face. A bold idea suddenly came to her mind. Every night, she was beaten mercilessly, but In Wuk always spared her face. To escape from her perverse husband, she decided to undergo facial surgery. On a rainy night, she fled from the villa and ran to the plastic surgery hospital. To avoid In Wuk's guards, she waited outside in the rain for Dr. Jung Won to finish work. Then, she silently followed him. After a difficult journey, Marie finally arrived at Dr. Jung Won's house. However, the cold rain made her collapse. Fortunately, the doctor heard someone falling and ran to see what had happened. He carried her inside his home and gave her his late wife's clothes to change into. Before Dr. Jung Won could ask what was wrong, Marie unbuttoned her blouse and revealed her bruised body, begging him for help. She could no longer live with that face. She pleaded with him to give her a new identity. She wanted to live. That was when Marie revealed the truth to Dr. Jung Won. She had an uncanny resemblance to In Wuk's deceased mother. The reason he beat her every night was that, as a child, he had witnessed his father beating his mother every day. In Wuk had seen his mother die at his father's hands, and that was when his mind became twisted. When he met Marie, he was stunned by her resemblance to his mother. He used every trick in the book to marry her. At first, Marie thought she had found a good husband, but over time, his true nature emerged. He beat her every night. Later, she discovered that he never actually cared for her. He only wanted someone who looked like his mother. That's why he never hit her face. Her misfortune came from her own appearance. Marie desperately begged Jung Won to save her, but he advised her to seek help from the law. Jung Won didn't know that Marie had already tried everything, but had failed to escape her husband. While he hesitated, he received an urgent message calling him to the hospital immediately. Before leaving, he told her to stay there until he returned. As soon as Jung Won left, Marie suddenly realized that, even though she had escaped, her sick mother was still under In Wuk's control. She called the hospital where her mother was being treated, but received terrible news. Her mother was critically ill. After hanging up the phone, she rushed to the hospital, unaware that she was falling into In Wuk's trap. Anxiously, she ran to her mother's room. Seeing that her mother was safe, she felt momentary relief. But when she followed the direction her mother pointed, she saw a figure that would haunt her for the rest of her life. The sight of In Wuk terrified her. He did not allow her to stay and visit her mother. On their way home, he tortured her until she was on the verge of death. But Marie never gave up on escaping him. To flee from her cruel husband, she devised a meticulous escape plan. This wealthy man had a disturbing habit. He beat her every night. Unfortunately, the next day, Marie discovered that she was infertile. If In Wuk found out, she would be dead. Now, her only option was to escape. That night, she placed a suicide note in Wuk's car, making it look like she had taken her own life. Then, she turned off her phone, which had a tracking device, ate a full meal, and packed her bags. She went to the beach. Taking off her high heels, she turned her phone back on to stage a scene suggesting that she had jumped into the sea and drowned. Now, Marie was finally free. She looked at the ocean with unwavering determination. In Wuk soon tracked her phone's location and immediately sent men to search for her. He followed the signal to the beach, but found only her belongings. He ordered his men to find her body. Even if she was dead, he needed to see it. However, In Wuk didn't believe that his wife would commit suicide so easily. He looked toward the dense forest behind him, and his intuition told him that Marie was still alive. He immediately sent his men to search the area. Meanwhile, Marie was running through the forest, but tripped over a tree root and fell. Her wallet slipped from her hands. As she got up to retrieve it, she heard a voice that terrified her. She abandoned her wallet and ran. Reaching the road, she desperately waved for a car to stop. In her desperate state, she even used her body to block the vehicles. At that moment, Dr. Jung Won drove by. Recognizing Marie, he stopped to help her. Inside the car, Jung Won asked what had happened. Marie explained that she had to make In Wuk believe she was dead to escape his grasp. She needed to disappear from the world so he would never find her. That was the only way. Dr. Jung Won agreed to help her vanish forever. Later, he took Marie to the hospital and performed facial surgery on her. That night, before the procedure, he asked what kind of face she wanted. Marie said that as long as In Wuk couldn't recognize her, that was all that mattered. The unfortunate woman had undergone several facial surgeries before, but when Jung Won removed the bandages, even though he expected it, he was stunned and collapsed to the floor. That was because Marie now had the exact same face as Jung Won's deceased wife. Although he had mentally prepared himself before the surgery, When he saw that face again, vivid images of his late wife flooded his mind. The pain of losing her was unbearable. Marie was also prepared for the shock. She took a deep breath and slowly opened her eyes. Seeing the unfamiliar face in the mirror, she was overcome with emotion. She thought about all the years of torture she had endured at In Wuk's hands. Now, at last, she had a new face to escape her cruel husband. Then, she profusely thanked Jung Won. Walking down the street, Marie stopped in front of every mirror to look at her new face. Even though she didn't know whose face it was, she decided that from now on, she would live a happy life. In the past, Marie had endured immense mental and physical suffering. Now, she had her freedom back, but she was struggling to survive. She didn't have a single penny to her name and had to spend the night at a bus station. The next day, Marie suddenly remembered that she had dropped her wallet in the mountains. She had no choice but to go back and retrieve it. However, when she arrived, she saw In Wuk's men still searching for her. To avoid being discovered, she ran away, but on the streets, she unexpectedly ran into her abusive husband. Even with a new face, the fear that In Wuk had instilled in her hadn't disappeared. Trembling, Marie started walking quickly. In her nervousness, she accidentally bumped into someone. She quickly picked up her bag, which had fallen to the ground, and ran away. At that moment, In Wuk suddenly called out to her. Marie froze in fear. But to her surprise, he was only trying to help her retrieve her fallen belongings. The incident left her shaken. After that, Marie continued wandering the streets. Once, she had been a rich wife. Now, she had to survive on bread. She tried finding a job, but no one would hire her due to her lack of experience. At night, with nowhere to go, she roamed the streets, seeking shelter from the rain under building eaves. Unfortunately, she encountered two thugs who tried to take advantage of her. Marie resisted, and in the struggle, her clothes were torn. As a result, she was taken to the police station. With no other option, she called Jung Won for help. When he arrived at the station and saw Marie, who looked like a frightened child, he felt sorry for her. After paying her bail, he took her to a restaurant and, with great care, even handed her a spoon. Marie was deeply moved by his kindness, something she had never experienced before. Unable to hold back her emotions, she burst into tears. Jung Won then took her back to his house. The next morning, Marie woke up early to prepare breakfast as a way of thanking Jung Won for letting her stay the night. During the meal, she asked why she had never seen his wife. However, when he remained silent, she didn't dare to ask again. She had no idea that Jung Won's wife had passed away months earlier and that he had performed surgery on her to make her look like his deceased wife. Meanwhile, In Wuk found the wallet Marie had dropped in the forest. That convinced him that she was still alive and merely hiding from him. At the same time, Marie's best friend, who had believed she was dead, saw someone who looked exactly like her. In shock, she couldn't believe her eyes. Jung Won noticed her reaction and called her outside. Still unable to comprehend what she had seen, demanded that he explain who the woman was. However, Jung Won refused to answer, fearing that Marie would overhear. He told Ha to ask another time, but she insisted on knowing the truth. When Jung Won still refused to respond, Ha realized everything on her own. She couldn't believe what the plastic surgeon had done. He had given another woman the exact appearance of his late wife. Inside the house, Marie overheard the entire conversation. That was the moment she finally understood why Jung Won had never answered her questions about his wife. She remembered how, once, when she had gone to the storage room to get a vacuum cleaner, Jung Won had seemed unusually tense. With that in mind, she decided to enter the room he had always forbidden her from accessing. When she looked at the photo hidden on the shelf, the truth hit her. Even though she had suspected it, seeing the image was a shock. The person in the picture looked exactly like her. At that moment, she felt as if she was inhabiting someone else's body. That was when she finally realized Jung Won had performed the surgery because he deeply missed his deceased wife. That night, Marie sat alone on a park bench. Jung Won approached her. Marie said that she now understood why he had been so shocked when he removed her bandages. Upon hearing this, he sincerely apologized. However, Marie reassured him that he didn't need to feel guilty. She thanked him because, thanks to his help, she had escaped that horrible life. He had helped her live again. Now, it no longer mattered whom she resembled. Later, on the way back home, Marie reflected on her situation. She didn't want Jung Won to be reminded of his late wife every time he looked at her. So, she invited him to dinner the next day as a farewell. After that, she would go find her own path. What she didn't know was that very night, her wealthy husband had found the wallet she had dropped in the forest. In Wuk was now certain that she was alive and merely hiding from him. That night, In Wuk suddenly remembered something. When Marie had escaped and returned home, she had been wearing a strange dress. This led him to conclude that someone had helped her. The next morning, he hired a police officer to track the brand of the dress and locate the store where it was purchased. He used an investigation as an excuse to obtain the store's customer list. Through this investigation, he discovered that the dress was a limited edition with only 10 pieces produced. The customers who had bought it should still have it. So, he only needed to find the person who no longer had the dress to get a clue about Marie's whereabouts. He and the officer started visiting the customers one by one. After several visits, only 2 names remained on the list. They quickly located one of them. The police officer used the investigation as an excuse and asked Ha to show a similar dress. With no other option, Ha went to check her closet. That was when she suddenly remembered that her best friend, Marie, had a dress just like it. She began to suspect that Jung Won might have lent the dress to another woman. After Ha appeared wearing the dress, In Wuk and the officer went to find the last person on the list. This time, In Wuk didn't wait for permission. He barged into Jung Won's house. Inside, he saw 2 plates of food on the table, but did not see Jung Won's wife. This made him even more suspicious. Determined to uncover the truth, he searched every corner of the house. Only the bathroom remained untouched. Marie, who was hiding inside, trembled with fear. Just as In Wuk was about to open the door, Jung Won acted quickly. He grabbed In Wuk's arm and warned him to stop. The 2 men stood there, neither willing to move. Sensing the growing tension, the police officer quickly intervened, advising In Wuk to stop before things escalated. Reluctantly, In Wuk released the doorknob. However, before leaving, he decided to check the wardrobe in the house. That was when he found a dress identical to the one he had been searching for. This discovery left him furious and deeply suspicious. There were only 10 limited edition dresses, and now he had found an extra one. What he didn't know is that when they had searched Ha's house earlier, the customer list had fallen to the floor. Ha had seen her best friend's name on the list and quickly called Jung Won. She found out that, not long ago, he had lent the dress to Marie. To throw In Wuk off the trail, Ha had a delivery person take another dress to Jung Won's house before In Wuk arrived. That was why In Wuk found an extra dress there. Filled with frustration, he returned home and lashed out at the police officer for being useless. Even though he hadn't found any solid evidence, his intuition told him that something was off about the woman in Jung Won's house. Meanwhile, Marie was trying to move on with her life. To escape domestic violence, she had sought out a plastic surgeon to change her face. However, Jung Won, longing for his late wife, had performed the surgery in a way that made her look exactly like her. Over time, Jung Won also took care of Marie when she had nowhere to go. To cope with his grief, he treated her the same way he had treated his wife before. Every night, he even carefully washed her feet. Marie, in turn, was deeply moved by his attentive care. Remembering the days when she had been brutally tortured by In Wuk, she now understood the difference between a man who destroys a woman's life and a man who makes it better. These beautiful moments never last long. At that moment, a sudden knock on the door shattered the warm atmosphere. When In Wuk arrived at Jung Won's house, he completely ignored the owner and barged in without permission. He wanted to confirm if the woman inside was really his wife. The two men were in the middle of an argument when Marie suddenly stepped out of the room. She called Jung Won husband and asked if they had a guest. This scene shocked In Wuk, but he didn't realize that the woman standing in front of him was actually his wife. Even though her face had changed, his cold, cruel eyes made Marie tremble. Noticing her fear, Jung Won immediately embraced her, using the warmth of his hands to comfort her. Seeing this, In Wuk apologized for his rude behavior and left. After he was gone, Marie was so terrified that she could barely stand. Jung Won had to help her back inside the house. He reassured her that everything was fine and that In Wuk hadn't recognized her. But the image of her abusive husband continued to haunt her. Every time she thought of his piercing eyes, she felt as if she were suffocating. Her fear was so intense that she broke into a cold sweat. After calming down, she spent the entire night thinking. She had been living with Jung Won for a few days now and had developed feelings for him. However, she didn't want to cause him any more trouble. So before dawn the next morning, she left. She rented a small, cheap room and was determined to start a new life with a new identity. What she didn't know was that In Wuk was still searching for her. The night before, when he saw Jung Won's wife, he noticed that she avoided eye contact with him, which made him uneasy. Something was off about that woman. Convinced that there was more to the story, he ordered the police to investigate. What In Wuk didn't know was that Jung Won's wife had died long ago and that the woman he was desperately searching for was actually Marie. The police quickly found a new lead. Their investigation revealed that Jung Won's wife was now managing an art gallery. The next day, In Wuk went to the gallery, but he didn't see Hak Young. Instead, he saw the same woman he had been looking for, Marie. This made him even more suspicious. Under In Wuk's relentless questioning, Ha refused to reveal Hak Young's whereabouts. To pressure her, he showed a magazine with his wife's photo and asked if she recognized her. He even threatened to shut down the gallery if she didn't cooperate. He gave her 2 days to think before meeting again. In Wuk was a terrifying and perverse magnate. Not only had he married a woman who looked like his mother, but he had also beaten his wife violently every night. But now, the wife who had been a victim of his abuse had mysteriously disappeared from the face of the earth. He spared no effort in searching every corner of the city for her. Finally, he found an oil painting in an art gallery that he was certain was somehow connected to his missing wife. Curious and impatient, he demanded to meet the person responsible for the artwork. The young woman at the gallery became visibly nervous and refused his request, claiming that the person in charge was attending an exhibition abroad. This only made In Wuk even more suspicious. After returning to his company, he immediately ordered an investigation into the art gallery. Unexpectedly, his subordinate uncovered a shocking secret. The person responsible for the gallery was none other than Hak Young, Jung Won's wife. But there was something terrifying about this discovery. 5 years ago, Hak-young had suffered a severe accident and had been in a vegetative state ever since. She had never woken up. This revelation shook In Wuk to his core. After all, just a few days earlier, he had personally met Jung Won's wife. If Hak-young had been in a coma for years, how could she now be running an art gallery? He was certain that Jung Won was hiding something from him. Convinced that Marie's disappearance was directly linked to Jung Won and Hak-young, he set out to uncover the truth. He went to the care facility where Hak-young had been hospitalized. But to his surprise, not only did he not find Hak-young there, but he also saw Jung Won at the facility. During questioning, Jung Won claimed that his wife had spent 5 years in the care facility, but had since fully recovered and returned home. Unable to find any concrete evidence, In Wuk had no choice but to leave. But his instincts told him that Jung Won was definitely lying. What he didn't know was that Jung Won's real wife had died long ago, and that Marie had undergone plastic surgery to look exactly like her. When he returned to his company, In Wuk immediately checked all the documents related to the art gallery. He was shocked to discover that the gallery was drowning in debt. This gave him an advantage. The next day, he returned to the gallery and directly asked for Hak-young. This time, he had come in person. He said he wanted to meet the manager and demanded that she be called immediately. Ha replied that she had already told him before. The manager was on a business trip abroad. However, In Wuk revealed that he had heard she was bedridden and unable to move. Then he issued a threat. If he couldn't see her by the next day, he would shut down the art gallery. Ha had no choice but to find Marie and inform her about the pressure In Wuk was putting on them. If Marie couldn't help them escape this crisis, the gallery they had worked so hard to build would go bankrupt. In Wuk suspected that Ha was protecting Marie. Marie asked Ha what she should do. Ha suggested that she pretend to be Hak-young, assume her identity, and meet with In Wuk. Marie returned home and thought about it for a long time. She truly wanted to help Dr. Jung Won, who had saved her. But the thought of her abusive husband beating her again terrified her. She spent the entire night struggling with this fear. Finally, at dawn, she gathered her courage and whispered to herself that she was no longer the Marie who had been beaten by her husband. She immediately called Ha and asked her to send all of Hak-young's documents. Marie knew that an ordinary performance wouldn't fool her suspicious husband. When she received the documents, she carefully studied them, reviewing every detail of Hak-young's life. She couldn't afford to make a single mistake. After preparing everything, she sat in front of the mirror and convinced herself that she was Hak-young. Then, she styled her hair, making it long, straight, and elegant, just like Hak-young's. She applied thick black mascara and painted her nails purple. She knew that In Wuk would recognize her neck, so she deliberately wore a scarf to cover any identifying details. Finally, she went to the art gallery, where In Wuk was already waiting. He had no idea that the woman standing before him was actually his wife, as Marie had recently undergone plastic surgery. Marie also feared that In Wuk might recognize her. So she kept reminding herself not to be afraid. She was no longer Marie. But In Wuk was highly suspicious. To test her identity, he ordered Ha to leave immediately, leaving them alone. Ha hesitated, worried about Marie, but Marie reassured her with a confident look. As soon as Ha left, Marie was alone with In Wuk. She tried to remain calm, but as she presented the artwork to him, her nerves betrayed her. Unconsciously, she made several hand gestures, which made In Wuk even more suspicious. His gaze fixed on Marie's neck. Something about it seemed too familiar. At that moment, the scarf around her neck slipped off and fell to the floor. In Wuk immediately bent down to pick it up. But when he looked up, he was shocked by what he saw. The neck before him was identical to his wife's. At that instant, he truly couldn't believe his eyes. Marie knew that her disguise had been compromised. She pretended to be calm, took the scarf back from In Wuk's hands, and immediately felt cold sweat forming on her forehead. Meanwhile, In Wuk rushed to the bathroom and splashed cold water on his face, trying to wake himself up. He couldn't understand how this woman could now have a neck identical to his wife's. At that moment, he still didn't know that the woman he had just met was the very wife he had been desperately searching for. But from that moment on, In Wuk began to suspect Marie's true identity. To clarify his doubts, he decided to take drastic action. He bought the entire stock of the art gallery for that year, just to see her signature on the contract. However, when he was about to sign the document, Marie did something unexpected. Instead of signing by hand, as he expected, she pulled out a pre-prepared stamp and sealed the contract. Seeing this, In Wuk quickly grabbed the fountain pen he always carried and insisted that she sign by hand. But Marie, keeping her composure, claimed that she was simply following business regulations and stamped the contract instead. This put In Wuk in a difficult position. Now, all he could do was wait for their next meeting. Marie, on the other hand, was completely exhausted. The stress of maintaining her disguise had left her physically and mentally drained. At that moment, Jung Won arrived. Seeing her wearing his late wife's clothes, his mind was flooded with memories. Images of his wife flashed through his mind. And, without thinking, he said something that broke Marie's heart. He called out his late wife's name. That unexpected blow made Marie's legs go weak. Jung Won immediately held her in his arms. Just then, In Wuk stepped out of the elevator. Jung Won reacted quickly, pulling Marie into a corner to hide her. Marie's eyes brimmed with emotions. And, as if a dam had burst, silent tears began streaming down her face. Marie immediately soaked Jung Won's jacket with her tears. After In Wuk left, she remembered that Jung Won had called her Hak Young. Quickly, she pulled away from his embrace and said that it had been a mistake. Jung Won wanted to take her home, but she refused. When Marie returned home, she couldn't stop thinking about everything: how Jung Won had washed her feet, how he had saved her number as a VIP contact. All of it had made her fall deeply in love with him. But at that moment, she realized that she was nothing more than a replacement for someone else. She had been the only one in love all along. Meanwhile, Jung Won was also on his way home. He realized that his words that morning had probably hurt Marie, but he didn't know why he suddenly felt heartbroken. Could he be falling in love again? Thinking about it, he immediately hailed a taxi by the side of the road and rushed to Marie's current residence. Marie was just as surprised by Jung Won's sudden arrival. Later, the two of them walked together through the park. They talked about everything that had happened that day, but suddenly, a bicycle came speeding toward them. Instinctively, Jung Won pulled Marie into his arms. After the scare, he apologized for calling her by the wrong name that day. He explained that he had just visited his late wife's grave and that his emotions were complicated, which had caused him to accidentally say her name. But Jung Won also admitted that his heart was in turmoil. He wasn't sure what his true feelings for Marie were, but now he wanted to take them seriously. Upon hearing this, Marie felt comforted. During dinner, she talked to Jung Won about her ex-husband, a powerful, wealthy man who could do anything he wanted. But Jung Won didn't pay attention to that. At that moment, all he wanted was to protect the woman in front of him. The next day, Ha came to see Jung Won and warned him to stay away from Marie, saying that In Wuk was too dangerous. She asked Jung Won if he had distanced himself from Marie. When he remained silent, Ha seemed to understand everything. She then pleaded with him to forget his late wife. It was then that she revealed the truth about Jung Won's former wife. Before she died, she had betrayed him. In fact, she had been on her way to meet her lover when she had the accident. But Jung Won didn't care. He had taken care of his wife for 5 years until her death. Ha couldn't understand why he was still holding on. She knew that Jung Won had always blamed himself. He had known that his wife was going to meet her lover, but he had never stopped her. That was why he felt responsible for her accident. But now, in front of Marie, he didn't want to have any more regrets. So he ordered an investigation into In Wuk. He discovered that, when they were young, In Wuk's mother and Marie looked very much alike. Could this really be just a coincidence? Meanwhile, In Wuk had ordered his men to monitor the doctors and homes connected to Marie. He found out that Jung Won and Marie were not living together. That only convinced him even more that Ha was hiding his wife. He had to find Ha and talk to her about it. On the other hand, Jung Won found out that Ha had asked Marie to pretend to be his late wife and sign the contract with In Wuk. He immediately confronted Ha and demanded that she cancel the contract. Ha was furious and asked if he was doing this because, when he saw Marie's face, he couldn't forget Ha Kyung. But Jung Won didn't answer. Ha took the opportunity to confess her love for him. However, Jung Won unexpectedly said that he would pretend he hadn't heard anything. Ha was heartbroken and cried in her car. Through the car window, In Wuk saw everything that had just happened. He decided to start working with Ha. He believed she knew something and that she would definitely help him find Marie. Now filled with jealousy after being rejected by Jung Won, Ha made a decision. She no longer wanted to live for him. She would live for herself. At the art gallery, she decided to collaborate with In Wuk. He asked her to arrange a meeting with Marie so that he could see her in person. That day, Marie thought Ha was simply inviting her to dinner, so she wasn't on guard. But when she arrived and saw In Wuk, she froze. She trembled and didn't dare look directly at him. In Wuk immediately noticed that she was different from the woman who had signed the contract. He started to suspect that she was hiding something. As Marie struggled to figure out what to do, Jung Won arrived just in time. He took her hand, giving her a sense of security. Every time In Wuk tried to meet with Marie alone to gather information about his wife, Jung Won intervened and stopped him. This infuriated In Wuk. Jung Won took Marie away. While they were in the car, Marie began to think that her presence would put Jung Won in danger. She decided to leave him. But Jung Won chased after her and stopped her. He wanted to protect her. In the end, Marie had no choice but to accept her feelings. But the perverted husband had seen everything. He secretly followed Marie home. After Jung Won left, In Wuk climbed the stairs and went to her apartment. Marie was getting ready for bed when she saw a shadow at the window. Her fears surged again. Outside, In Wuk was pounding on the door frantically. Marie quickly hid in the corner of the room, too terrified to move. Moments later, In Wuk broke down the door and entered. His gaze swept across the room, searching for her. He shouted her name. Then, his eyes landed on the paintings in the corner of the room. His expression darkened. He was now absolutely certain that his wife was there. Marie was trembling in the corner, completely paralyzed by fear. Desperate, she clutched her shirt, trying to stay quiet. But in doing so, she accidentally revealed part of her face. In Wuk saw it. His eyes widened with shock and fury. He demanded to know where his wife was. He shouted at Marie, making her even more frightened. She was shaking so much that her body felt weak. but she still tried her best to escape his grip. She pretended not to know anything and asked why he had come there. In Wuk didn't believe her. He grabbed Marie by the arm, forcing her to face him. He stared at her face. It was both unfamiliar and strangely familiar. With hatred in his eyes, In Wuk shouted angrily, demanding to know where his wife was, who Marie was, and what had happened. He looked at Marie with shock and suspicion. At that moment, Jung Won arrived just in time. Without hesitation, he punched In Wuk, knocking him to the ground. Then, he quickly embraced Marie and led her away. Watching them leave, In Wuk couldn't accept it. He was furious. He grabbed a nearby wooden stick and ran after them, full of rage. He pushed the door open and saw them standing together, which made him even angrier. He rushed forward and swung the stick at Jung Won, demanding to know what they were hiding from him. Marie was terrified and immediately called the police. Meanwhile, In Wuk and Jung Won were still fighting. But Jung Won was no match for him. Fortunately, a bodyguard saw the police arriving and quickly pulled In Wuk away. Marie looked at Jung Won's bruised face and began to cry. Meanwhile, In Wuk, consumed by madness, started smashing the furniture around him. He punched a steel fence with his bare hands, still convinced that Marie was hiding his wife. He kept hitting the fence until he punched a hole through it, releasing his rage through physical pain. Afterward, still injured, he went to Ha's house. He told her he was certain she knew the truth, but was still hiding it from him. A painter from the art gallery was inside the rented house and, upon seeing what was happening, became frightened. In Wuk demanded that Ha tell him where his wife was. Ha looked at him and, for the first time, felt sympathy for him. She started to pity him. She thought that the man in front of her had never been truly loved by anyone. He had endured the same tragic circumstances as she had. Without being able to stop herself, Ha reached out and touched his face. But at that crucial moment, In Wuk slapped her hand away. He made it clear. He only loved Marie. After that, In Wuk sat down in a chair, and tears welled up in his eyes. Meanwhile, Marie felt guilty seeing Jung Won hurt because of her. She couldn't bear to put him in danger any longer. So she decided to leave for a distant place. She bought a ticket to another city and was about to leave when she saw Jung Won calling her. When Jung Won woke up and didn't find Marie, he called her, begging her not to leave. Marie sat on a bench, lost in thought. If she stayed, she would put Jung Won in even greater danger. But she also couldn't bear to leave him. Fortunately, Jung Won arrived just in time. He stopped her from leaving, and they embraced and cried together. Meanwhile, In Wuk went to his wife's painting studio. He picked up the apron she always wore while painting and smelled it. At that moment, he recalled seeing his wife's silhouette in Marie. The story of his missing wife was published in the newspaper, and his father found out. Enraged, he scolded In Wuk for being useless. He told him that he had a wife, but he let her disappear. To his father, he was nothing but a failure. Then he ordered In Wuk to bring his wife back within 10 days. When he finished speaking, he was about to slap In Wuk. But since there were many people around, he held back. In Wuk sat in his car, lost in thought. The driver glanced at his injured hand and asked what had happened. In Wuk simply let out a sarcastic smile. Even a driver could see that he was hurt, but his father didn't care. At that moment, In Wuk truly looked pathetic. To prevent Marie from being scared if her ex-husband came looking for her again, Jung Won decided to take her to live in his house. He also told her that he would face all the challenges alongside her. Marie felt safe being with him. The next day, Ha saw that Jung Won was injured and felt her heart break. But he remained indifferent and didn't speak to her. Jung Won started to suspect Ha. Had she deliberately arranged for Marie to meet her ex-husband the night before? He hoped she wouldn't make any more mistakes. Meanwhile, In Wuk was under extreme pressure from his father to find his wife within 10 days. He ordered more people to search for clues about her. Marie wanted to visit her mother at the nursing home but realized that someone was following her. She called Jung Won for help. Unexpectedly, Jung Won was also being followed. With no other choice, Marie gave up on visiting her mother. To throw off their pursuers, Jung Won and Marie went out together, pretending to be a loving couple. At the same time, Jung Won's brother saw Marie for the first time. He was shocked to realize that her face was identical to Ha's. Jung Won had never suspected his brother, so he told him the truth. However, unexpectedly, Song pulled out an old photo of the three of them together. It turned out that he had always secretly loved Jung Won's wife. Meanwhile, one of In Wuk's subordinates went after Jung Won's brother. He wanted to extract the truth from Song. He also began secretly investigating the doctor's past. Meanwhile, since Marie and Jung Won were being followed, they decided not to leave the house. They spent time together cooking and playing happily. Their feelings for each other grew stronger every day. Jung Won even washed Marie's feet. That night, he confessed his love for Marie. The next day, he wanted to express his feelings more seriously. He wanted Marie to know that his love for her wasn't just because she looked like his late wife. Now, his heart belonged only to Marie. So, he bought a large bouquet of flowers and went to the restaurant where he had arranged to meet her. But before he even entered, he received a message from In Wuk. It was a photo of his brother and his ex-wife. Jung Won was completely stunned. Although he had known there was someone else in his wife's past, he never expected it to be his own brother. The feeling of betrayal hit him hard, sending his heart into panic. Marie sat in front of him, unaware of what had happened, and confessed her love for him. But Jung Won looked at Marie as if she were his ex-wife. His mind drifted back to memories of his past marriage. The words he had prepared were now impossible to say. Then, Jung Won went to find his brother and accused him of being a traitor. But his brother seemed indifferent. He believed that after Ha's death, the truth would be buried. Song even declared loudly that he had loved Ha first, and that Jung Won had stolen his girlfriend from him. Jung Won didn't want to hear anymore. He cut ties with his brother and left in anger. In Wuk deliberately told Ha about this, saying it was retribution for her. He intentionally made the man Ha loved suffer. Ha couldn't believe that this man could be so cruel. She asked him what he would do if Marie loved someone else. Without hesitation, In Wuk said he would kill them. He would kill them both. That was what love meant to him. Ha went to Jung Won's house and found Marie there. She angrily told Marie the truth, blaming her for hurting Jung Won. As she was leaving, Ha encountered Jung Won at the door. She accused him of still being unable to forget Ha. Then, cruelly, she revealed to him that his ex-wife had never loved him, not even a little. Furthermore, she had heartlessly aborted their unborn child and later pretended to have a miscarriage in front of him. Ha begged Jung Won to take Marie away, otherwise, her husband would kill them both. Jung Won was devastated. Marie saw Jung Won kneeling on the ground, crying. She ran to comfort him, but Jung Won looked at her in anger and asked why he had loved her so sincerely. Why had she betrayed him? Why had she made him suffer? Meanwhile, In Wuk was sleeping when he suddenly had a nightmare. He saw Marie transforming into someone else. He woke up in fear. His sixth sense also filled him with anxiety. He couldn't believe that the face of the woman he loved the most had been changed. In Wuk reassured himself, saying it was just a dream. Then he took out an old photo of the two of them together. Looking at Marie's face, he slowly calmed down. Meanwhile, Marie noticed that Jung Won wasn't doing well. She was afraid that her ex-husband would harm him. Marie gathered her courage and decided to pretend to be Jung Won's wife to prepare for a meeting with In Wuk. As she was about to go to In Wuk's office, she unexpectedly ran into her ex-father-in-law. The sight of him frightened her so much that she almost collapsed. To her shock, as she walked past him, he called her back and greeted her. He had investigated the situation and found out that his son hadn't done anything wrong. Ha's art gallery was on the verge of bankruptcy, and he suspected that she was taking advantage of his son. In Wuk was sitting in his office when he heard about their encounter. He immediately rushed downstairs to explain. He protected Marie in front of his father, afraid that his father might do something terrible in front of her. Then, he quickly pulled Marie away. Once they were inside his office, Marie told him to stop making things difficult for Jung Won. She told him that his family matters were no longer her concern. She had returned to Jung Won and asked In Wuk not to interfere in their private lives anymore. Marie then noticed In Wuk touching his cufflinks. She remembered the times he had beaten her, and fear surged within her again. This only made In Wuk even more suspicious. When Marie left the office, her heart was pounding so hard it felt like it would leap out of her chest. In Wuk saw her terrified expression and became even more convinced of something. But he didn't dare believe what he was thinking. He reassured himself that he was just imagining things. Trying to calm down, In Wuk quickly discovered where Marie's mother was living. He went to the nursing home, but didn't expect to find Marie and Jung Won there. As the two were about to leave, In Wuk appeared at the door. Fortunately, they managed to avoid him. In Wuk then went into the room to see his mother-in-law. Unexpectedly, she picked up a photo and smiled happily, saying that this was her son-in-law. At that moment, In Wuk felt utterly betrayed. He was the only one who was supposed to be her son-in-law. He couldn't believe that the Marie he loved had brought another man to visit her. He quickly left the nursing home to look for Marie, but she and Jung Won had already left just a minute earlier. Frustrated, In Wuk went to see the director of the nursing home. The director was Jung Won's brother, Song Ho. In Wuk demanded to know where Jung Won and had taken his wife. Then, he showed Song Ho the video recording from the day Jung Won's wife had the accident. It turned out that Song Ho and Ha were driving and playing around, causing Ha to lose focus and get into an accident. Song saw that Ha was unconscious and didn't call the police. He was afraid that it would affect his career. So, instead of helping her, he abandoned her. She remained unconscious for 5 years. Faced with such evidence, In Wuk demanded to know why he hadn't called the police. Unexpectedly, Song claimed that as a doctor, he had assessed the situation. He thought she was likely to die anyway, but instead, she remained in a coma for 5 years before passing away. It was already a miracle. In Wuk was furious. If Ha was dead, then who was the Ha he had met? He questioned Song in anger, demanding to know who that woman was. Finally, In Wuk discovered the truth. The wife he had loved had undergone plastic surgery to change her face. She had even been pretending to be someone else in front of him. In Wuk couldn't believe it. He went to visit the grave of the doctor's wife. As soon as he saw Ha's photo, he recalled her actions in front of him. That convinced him even more that she was the wife he had been searching for all this time. In Wuk lost his mind. He called Marie, but she didn't answer. At that moment, she was traveling with Jung Won. They had finally confirmed their relationship and had officially started dating. Since he couldn't reach his wife, In Wuk went to Ha's art gallery and caused trouble. Furious, He demanded that she tell him the truth. He looked like a madman. Ha advised him to calm down. She felt sorry for him. Because he had never had a mother, he had fallen into the illusion of finding a wife who resembled her. She pitied him because he had never been truly loved. Finally, In Wuk began to cry. Ha advised him to let Marie go. Unexpectedly, In Wuk, who had been crying, suddenly started laughing. He couldn't go back now. Then, in a fit of rage, In Wuk pointed a gun at Ha's head and threatened her. He demanded that she call Marie, but Ha was unafraid of death. She told Marie to run. Marie still didn't know what was happening when In Wuk grabbed her phone. He ordered her to return by noon that day, otherwise, he would kill Ha. Marie was terrified. She didn't dare tell Jung Won and secretly hid the truth from him. Then she boarded a train back. Marie felt a deep chill inside her heart. When she arrived at In Wuk's art gallery, he rushed to her and embraced her tightly. Marie pushed him away, saying that he had replaced the person he loved with someone else. It no longer mattered to her. Unexpectedly, her husband told her that everything could go back to how it was. He would do whatever it took to return her to her original appearance. Seeing Marie's terrified expression, he finally burst into laughter. He laughed and cried at the same time. At last, the woman he loved had returned to him. Suddenly, Ha, ignoring the danger, pushed In Wuk aside and told Marie to run. In Wuk shoved Ha to the ground, knocking her unconscious. Marie ran as fast as she could, but In Wuk immediately chased after her. Jung Won arrived, but it was too late. In the end, In Wuk grabbed Marie's shirt. She desperately tried to escape, but he caught her again. She couldn't break free from his grip. After forcing her into the car, In Wuk looked at his wife. He recalled all the times she had been with Jung Won. His heart was filled with rage. In Wuk was terrified that his father would find out about his wife's changed face. Then, he took her back to the villa. Marie pleaded with him to let her go. She no longer had the appearance he once loved, and she had fallen in love with someone else. But In Wuk furiously criticized her. He said he could forgive her for betraying him, but if she continued to resist, he would deal with the doctor first and then find someone to make her look like she used to. After that, he locked her in a room. Separated by a door, Marie missed Jung Won and wept. Meanwhile, In Wuk also thought of his wife and cried bitterly. In Wuk had contacted the best plastic surgeons, but they all refused. So, he went to find Jung Won's brother and threatened him to change Marie's face back. But Som Ho told him that only Jung Won could do it. Since Jung Won was the one who had originally made Marie look like his late wife, only he could restore her original appearance. So, In Wuk ordered Jung Won to be kidnapped and demanded that he perform plastic surgery on Marie. If he refused, he wouldn't leave that place alive. Marie immediately fell to her knees, begging In Wuk to let Jung Won go. Seeing his wife kneeling before another man, In Wuk became enraged. He told her to shut up. Jung Won said that In Wuk didn't understand what love was. But In Wuk only laughed and punched Jung Won. He shouted that Jung Won had turned another man's wife into someone who resembled his own wife. How could he do that? Inside the room, Marie told Jung Won to change her back to her original face. She didn't want him to get hurt because of her. Jung Won reached out to touch her face, but Marie pulled away. She knew her husband was outside, watching them. In Wuk was furious. He didn't want to see any more and stormed out. Returning to his room, he grabbed a photo of Marie and stared at it. Jung Won, however, couldn't bring himself to pick up the scalpel. Marie had no choice but to try to console In Wuk. She told him she wanted someone else to perform the surgery and that it didn't matter how she looked. After that, In Wuk took Marie back, leaving Jung Won behind, losing his mind. On the way home, while In Wuk was on the phone, Marie ran toward the main road. She didn't want to go back to In Wuk. She wanted to end her life right there. At that critical moment, In Wuk realized what was happening and pulled her back, disregarding his own safety. Marie threatened him. If he touched Jung Won, she would destroy herself. In Wuk was truly terrified by her words. Seeing this, why would anyone want this couple to reunite? In Wuk took Marie home. He prepared to kiss her neck, but she rejected him. His father had ordered him to bring Marie back so he could see her. He said he would rather die than not see her body. In Wuk didn't dare tell the truth. He simply said that Marie had not yet fully recovered. His father deliberately remarked that In Wuk had always been a liar since childhood. Because of his behavior, his mother had abandoned him and later died. In Wuk was devastated. He picked up a photo of his mother and stared at it. Gradually, he calmed down. He went back to embracing Marie, because only with her did he feel at peace. But when she turned her head, he saw a face that was unfamiliar. Instantly, he lost interest and pushed her away. That night, it rained. He saw Marie return, but looking at her strange face, he couldn't smile. The next day, In Wuk's father discovered that Marie had undergone plastic surgery. Enraged, he was about to hurt her. But In Wuk arrived just in time and hugged her. He told his father to hit him instead, not to touch the woman he loved. Then he held her tightly and said that she was his. But unexpectedly, that night, In Wuk lost control again. He attacked Marie once more. That night, Marie secretly went to the painting studio. She took a memory card from her bag. It contained footage of In Wuk's violent attacks on her. But unexpectedly, he stole it from her. Holding the video in his hand, In Wuk couldn't believe he had done that to Marie. He had always loved her, yet he had hurt her. But when he looked up, he blamed everything on her. Marie couldn't take it anymore, and the two argued. She told him that his actions weren't love. In Wuk lost his mind and forced her to admit that it was all her fault, that she had made him do those things. But Marie refused to admit it, even if it cost her life. They argued again. In Wuk completely lost control. He cried and rolled up his sleeves. Marie's nightmare began all over again. She collapsed to the ground in despair. The next day, Marie and In Wuk went to a restaurant for dinner. While there, Ha saw Marie going to the bathroom and followed her. She told Marie to escape. But when she touched Marie, she realized something was wrong. She rushed to tell Jung Won. Jung Won's eyes turned red with rage. He stormed into In Wuk's house. Marie and Jung Won embraced each other. In Wuk pulled out a gun. The two were frightened and backed away. But In Wuk pointed the gun at his own temple, terrifying Marie. In Wuk said there was only one bullet in the gun. He wanted to prove his love for her. Marie quickly fell to her knees and begged him to stop. In Wuk looked at Jung Won with a triumphant expression. But unexpectedly, Jung Won also picked up a gun. Marie was kneeling on the ground. No matter how much she begged, they wouldn't stop. She cried and pleaded for them to end it. Jung Won told In Wuk that threatening the person you love with your life was cowardly. In Wuk let them go. But just as they reached the front gate, In Wuk's secretary ran up and handed the phone to Marie. It turned out that In Wuk had brought Marie's mother to his house. He had deliberately taken her mother there to force Marie to return to him immediately. Otherwise, he wouldn't be responsible for what happened to her. Marie's mother was her greatest weakness. Seeing her mother in that state, she immediately ran back. Jung Won was stopped by the guards. In the blink of an eye, Marie left Jung Won and ran back. Jung Won was left behind, heartbroken. From afar, In Wuk no longer cared about anything. He only wanted Marie back with him. Even though Marie told him that she didn't love him, In Wuk cried and said it didn't matter anymore. He asked if she truly loved Jung Won. Marie didn't hesitate. She said yes. In Wuk seemed to go mad with despair and screamed. He shouted that besides him, who else could she love? Marie told him that her body and heart no longer belonged to him. In Wuk wanted to prove his love for his wife. So he pointed the gun at his own head. Before that, Jung Won wanted to take the recording he had made at Marie's house to a lawyer and asked them to handle her divorce proceedings due to domestic violence. But the recording alone was not enough. The lawyer said they needed video evidence of the violence or medical reports documenting her injuries. Fortunately, Marie had secretly recorded In Wuk beating her that night. Since she couldn't leave, she had deliberately hidden the memory card inside a painting. So, she asked her best friend to retrieve it. However, Jung Won searched the painting all night and couldn't find anything unusual. Meanwhile, In Wuk also tracked down the doctor who had performed Marie's surgery. That day, he planned to take her there. As they were on their way, Jung Won finally found the memory card hidden in the painting. Seeing Marie covered in bruises from being beaten by In Wuk, Jung Won's heart ached. He quickly called the lawyer and asked them to proceed with Marie's surgery. He then held up the video recording and demanded that In Wuk divorce Marie. Otherwise, he would release the footage and ruin In Wuk's life. In Wuk returned home in despair. He looked at Marie with sorrow and asked her if she wanted to leave or stay. Marie didn't hesitate. She wanted to leave. In Wuk let her go. He sat alone in his house, crying silently. He drank and sobbed. Then, he pointed a gun at his own head, unable to control his thoughts. He hoped she would come back. The next day, In Wuk burned everything that reminded him of their past. He told his secretary to proceed with the divorce. Even his closest secretary was surprised. In Wuk called Marie and said he agreed to the divorce, but under one condition. He wanted to go to court with her alone. He also went to Jung Won and informed him of his decision. Although Jung Won was surprised, he agreed. At the meeting place, the two were about to go to court when In Wuk called them back. He wanted to have one last meal with Marie. In Wuk thought he could forget her, but the moment he saw Marie, he regretted everything. While they were eating, he begged her to reconsider. They could go back to how things were before. Marie didn't hesitate. She said their story was over. In Wuk said nothing. While driving Marie to court, Jung Won called. Hearing the ringtone, In Wuk became irritated. When they arrived at the courthouse, he suddenly turned the car around. He begged Marie, this would be the last time. He wanted to go to the amusement park together to relive their past memories. Then he started driving recklessly. Seeing In Wuk like that, Marie wanted to jump out of the car, but he stopped her. They arrived at a grassy area near the road. He angrily dragged her onto the grass. Meanwhile, Jung Won couldn't get in touch with Marie. So, he went to her location. Desperately, In Wuk asked Marie if she had ever loved him. Marie didn't hesitate. She said she never loved him. I'm sorry, she added. Then, she told In Wuk that the person he truly loved wasn't her. It was because she looked like his mother. In Wuk was about to pull the trigger to prove his love for her. Fortunately, Marie stopped him in time. The bullet grazed her, and both of them fell unconscious on the ground. When Marie regained consciousness, she quickly called an ambulance. Marie fell into a coma from the shock. Both of them were taken to the hospital at the same time. By the time Jung Won arrived at the grassy area, they were gone. In Wuk woke up and refused surgery. He didn't care and ran off to search for Marie. After Marie woke up, she fled from the hospital. She almost ran into In Wuk. She hid behind a tree, waiting for him to pass. In Wuk couldn't find his wife. He stood at the hospital entrance, shouting loudly. Because of a severe concussion, he fell into a coma again. When Jung Won arrived, he saw In Wuk behaving like a madman. He refused surgery and kept calling Marie's name. Marie, like a lost soul, wandered the streets. By chance, Jung Won found her. Finally, they saw each other again. They remembered their first meeting, and Marie started crying. In Wuk woke up and wanted to find Marie. He asked his secretary to bring him clothes. The secretary told him that the police were waiting for him to wake up before taking him in for questioning. In Wuk lost his mind. He ordered the secretary to go outside and distract the police so he could escape. He ran to Marie's hospital room, but Ha was standing outside the door. She advised him to stop, but he didn't care. He pushed her aside and barged in. Ha quickly called Jung Won. Jung Won ran outside to stop In Wuk. He told him to come outside so they could talk. In Wuk said that his story with Marie wouldn't end so easily. It would only end if one of them died. Jung Won told him that happiness was in his hands. If In Wuk let go, both of them could be happy. But In Wuk, enraged, attacked Jung Won. He tried to push him down, but since his head was still injured, his strength had weakened. Jung Won escaped from In Wuk's grasp. At that moment, In Wuk finally understood that no matter what he did, Marie would never come back to him. He realized the truth and jumped onto the railing. He begged Jung Won to push him off. Only then would everything come to an end. For a brief moment, Jung Won's mind went blank. He grabbed In Wuk's shirt in anger. In Wuk pleaded with Jung Won to kill him. Jung Won truly wanted to do it for Marie. But at that critical moment, Marie arrived just in time. She begged Jung Won not to make a mistake because of her. Jung Won threw In Wuk to the ground in frustration. The police arrived quickly and arrested him. At the police station, Marie gathered her courage and told the full story of her abuse and facial reconstruction. As soon as In Wuk left the station, he was surrounded by reporters. He admitted everything he had done to Marie. Not only that, but he also exposed his father's illegal business dealings to the reporters, destroying his father's company with his own hands. Inside the car, In Wuk told his secretary that he had transferred a sum of money and advised him to leave for a while. Because In Wuk knew that his secretary was the only person who had ever truly cared about him. However, the secretary refused to leave. He told In Wuk that he would stay by his side, even if he died. In Wuk went home and told his stepmother to leave immediately because everything was over. Then, he pointed a gun at his father, filled with hatred for the way he had turned out. Unexpectedly, his father told him that if he killed him, he would be no different from him. In Wuk screamed that he was nothing like his father. But in the end, he couldn't pull the trigger. Meanwhile, Marie was in her room, unconscious from taking medication. She thought Ha had come back. Unexpectedly, she was kidnapped by In Wuk again. When Jung Won found out, he called In Wuk, but In Wuk had completely lost his mind. He gave Jung Won an address and told him to come and watch with his own eyes as both he and Marie died together. In Wuk took Marie to the pool at the villa. Then, he embraced her and said they would die together. As he spoke, he pointed the gun at her heart. That way, both of them could die with a single shot. At that moment, Marie felt numb. She was no longer afraid or resisting. Just then, In Wuk's head throbbed violently with pain. Marie seized the opportunity to push him away. She aimed the gun in a different direction. In Wuk fell into the pool. He didn't struggle underwater. In Wuk finally understood. Only after losing everything could he truly see with his heart. When he was about to end his life, he saw Jung Won running in and embracing Marie. In Wuk got up again and aimed a gun at Jung Won. But unexpectedly, Marie took the bullet for him and fell unconscious. In Wuk was truly driven mad by pain. He couldn't believe that he had killed the person he loved. At that moment, In Wuk didn't hesitate. He took his own life. He wanted to become someone who could understand love. And when he did, he would give her the best things in the world. Thus, the tragic life of In Wuk ended. His entire life, he had never been truly loved by anyone. Marie was rescued in time and survived. Then, she and Jung Won lived happily ever after. And that's how this episode ends. I hope you all enjoyed it, and I ask you to subscribe to the channel so I can continue making videos for you. See you later.